Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of Two Plane Sports. Today is Wednesday, February 8th, and we're back with another episode, recruiting talk, and we're going to be talking a little bit of basketball at the very end, but not a whole lot, mainly recruiting, because I know everyone loves recruiting videos. So today we're going to be talking about 2024 five-star Williams Nwaneri, his upcoming visits, and who's going to be in the running for his services. An update on Michael Hawkins, Devon Mitchell with his transfer to Los Alamitos High School out in California, which is crazy. That came out of the blue. And we're going to talk a little Porter Moser. So we'll hop into it right now. So the first guy, and I think everyone wants to know about Williams Nwaneri, 2024 five-star defensive lineman, 6'5", 245-pound kid out of Lee Summit, Missouri. Probably sounds familiar to a lot of people considering he is coming from Caden Green's high school. He's a 2024 five-star, the number 3 defensive lineman in the class, the number 1 overall, or the number 3 overall player, and the number 1 defensive lineman in the class, according to 247. So an extremely talented guy coming into his senior year. He seems like he's got his top few schools with Missouri, OU, and then Colorado might be up there. Could in Oregon, could at Tennessee. Kind of seems like that they're kind of in the running, everyone except Colorado. So it's Missouri, Oklahoma, Oregon, and Tennessee are all warm on his 247 page. He just locked in an official visit with Oklahoma next month, and then an official visit with Colorado in April. So it seems like that OU is going to go head-to-head with Deion Sanders. And for this recruitment, I'm not saying that Deion's the only threat in this. I think every school that's warmer in his top 5 or presumably top 5 are viable options for him. Jose, what do you think about Nwaneri and where he'll end up?
Yeah, I don't actually think it's much of a Deion Sanders in Colorado or much of a threat for Williams. It really seems to be more of a regional thing. So trying to beat out Missouri, and then maybe some top schools that have a history of developing defensive linemen. Oregon is probably going to be a big competitor in this one. A&M is always going to be a competitor for defensive linemen, no matter how much we hate that situation. That's just a matter of fact. Luckily, as we've mentioned a few times, especially and refer back to when Parker Thune was on our show last, there's a lot of things that point in the favor of Oklahoma. I would by no means say that OU is the favorite, but you'd got to like where Oklahoma sits with the fact that we have his ex-teammate and Caden Green on the team. Coach played for Oklahoma. There's a lot of Oklahoma connections. You just got to really try to continue recruiting. This is a guy that you can't stop communicating, make him feel comfortable with the coaches, with the situation. And if a decision is to come before his senior season starts, which for the most part for every single recruit, you can kind of expect that, you got to try to make him feel comfortable in Norman and show him that there's actual progress going on in that defensive line room, either with the edges or interior, depending on where he'll play. Because he is a pretty versatile guy. I would probably say he's going to be more of an edge guy, kind of like a PJ Adebawore. But you never know how these guys' bodies will start filling out once they get to college. He just has to see progress. I think that's really going to be the biggest thing for Oklahoma going into next year and the recruiting for defensive linemen is, even though you might not have all the guys you want locked in before the season starts, if the team shows that it's gotten better, the defensive line looks more physical, the production is there, the numbers are on the stat sheet are going in the right direction, especially compared to last year, you'll start pulling in those guys. It's just a matter of showing them that Todd Bates is going to be the guy that can do it for him at Oklahoma. Because even though he does have a track record at Clemson, it's a new place. Pretty much having to build that entire room from scratch because let's be honest, the last regime, even though we had some big guys that were mean, just weren't put in a position to succeed at all times. So you got to figure out how those performances can start improving going into next fall.
I do agree. I mean, 2023, I think a lot of kids look at it and can just throw it out. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, it happened. Not every program. I mean, you can't win every single year. with the new staff coming in. I mean, yeah, Lincoln Riley came in and won, but they weren't great. I mean, they obviously got boat raced by Utah and didn't look great against Tulane. But it's hard to build a program from the ground up like Brent Venables is doing. And I think a lot of players realize that. And with Williams and Nwaneri, I mean, when you look at Missouri, obviously they're the hometown school, but Missouri has not been a great program as of late. I mean, in a long time anyway. Could their coaching staff be on the hot seat? Maybe. You look at Colorado, yeah, they've got a brand new coaching staff, so you don't have to worry about that. But it's also going to play in the Pac-12 that has a lot of uncertainty behind it, considering USC and UCLA are leaving in 2024. I feel like that comes back to haunt Colorado, not only in Williams and Nwaneri's recruitment, but I think in general for elite talent. I mean, you're going to go play in the Pac-12 that doesn't have two of its biggest brands outside of Oregon that'll be leaving. And then you look at Tennessee. Tennessee, I think, is a real threat. I think Oregon's a viable threat as long as Dan Lanning's at Oregon and they've got Nike backing them. Like you said, I mean, they're going to be a threat. But Nwaneri is extremely talented. It seems like he's comfortable with the OU staff. But I agree. I think a lot of these Elite 24 kids are going to be watching along the defensive line. We gave you a grace period last year. But you have a year to be here, recruit, get transfers. We've got to see some improvement. It doesn't have to be the best defensive line in the country, but if it's the same product on the field, I wouldn't like our odds with Williams Nwaneri or any elite talent if there is no improvement, which I think there will be. What do you think?
I do think there will be improvement, and if there's not only will there be some trouble on the recruiting trail, but probably hot seat for Todd Bates, which is kind of crazy to think because when we were covering the coaching, all the support staff search, like after Venables was hired, he was the hottest name. Him, Sean Newell were the two biggest names with regards to who was going to get this defensive line spot. And I know you were big on Todd Bates. A lot of people were because of the production he had at Clemson. But again, going into a situation at Clemson where he maybe didn't have to build it in the exact same situation. Recruiting might have been easier, or I don't know. The situations are different. Clearly, year one, it's not like he did a terrible job. He got, which at the time, a top 100 player in Derek LeBlanc, who is expected to probably have a pretty pivotal role in helping this defensive line transform over the next couple of years. He just has to put it on the field, right? The one thing with Missouri, as much as they haven't been the greatest team, it's not like they're competing for SEC championships or even for their side of the conference, their division. They are somehow always able to stay towards the top of the list for those Missouri kids. I mean, you saw Luther Burden. He went from being at Oklahoma for a long time to decommitting, and now he's at Missouri. They were in the mix for Kane Green for a long time. I'm pretty sure that PJ went on a couple of visits there as well. So they do a good job of trying to keep the in-state kids in state. They might not always be successful, but they're never that far off of being at least considered.
It feels like that they do a better job as far as keeping great elite talent at home in their own state than Oklahoma does.
Oh, yeah, at least as of late. And I think Venables, I mean, we've seen it. He's trying to change that. And it really seems like if you just look at the last two recruiting cycles he's been a part of, the spring is kind of where he tries to bring a lot of preferred walk-ons he brings on are really only from Oklahoma. And he's trying to prioritize it again, but he's also trying to rebuild roots that weren't really there with the last regime and trying to get a lot of Dallas back. Really the state of Texas and the surrounding states, because those kind of went away under Lincoln Riley since he was really focused on California, who brought a lot of talent to Oklahoma, but that's not really the main focus of this staff.
No, I would agree. I mean, I like the more, surrounding states. Obviously, Texas is full of talent, Kansas, Missouri, even some great talent in the state of Oklahoma. I mean, they've got an elite defensive lineman in Xavier Sims, and then obviously David Stone hails from here but plays in Florida. So there's a lot of great talent around here. I'm liking that they're prioritizing. If you had to pick today, where does Williams Nwaneri end up come December?
I'm just gonna take Parker's word for it from when he was here last time, and I'll pick Oklahoma, but it's like barely. I think the production that is going to be on the field next fall is going to be so important in getting anyone that, these highly ranked defensive linemen for 2024, that it's tough to say at this moment, but I'll stick to Parker's balls and go with Oklahoma.
Stick to him, huh?
Yep.
I do. I think it's either going to come down to OU or Oregon. I think Oregon is going to be a legitimate threat, and I don't think when it comes time to make a decision, Missouri is going to be a legitimate landing spot for him, but I think Oregon could be. And I mean, Tennessee could be, but I kind of think Oregon comes in, and we've seen them before push for some defensive linemen or elite defensive players. And as long as Dan Lanning's there and they keep winning, but the uncertainty with the Pac-12 that I said with Colorado, that could play a factor as well. I mean, you go out and play in the Pac-12, you've got no national media really watching you a whole lot. But come 24, you've got an easy path to the playoffs every single year. So there's some pros there.
Mm-hmm. And with how quiet his recruitment is, and I know we're still in the spring before, pretty much a year out from him actually signing a piece of paper and declaring it for a school. It's pretty quiet. Like, you see a lot of 5-stars. They're kind of big on social media, and they're being smart about it. They're building their brand. That's kind of what these kids have to do now. With NIL being a big part of it, Williams is not really that kind of guy. From looking, outside looking in, everything's pretty relatively quiet. Wouldn't be surprised that if he does decide to commit to whatever school before his senior season, that's more than likely going to be the place that he ends up signing his letter of intent to. Seems to be a kind of guy, a PJ kind of guy. If you're going to compare him to anyone that's in Oklahoma's class, where his word means, what he says is what he's going to stick to, and would not be surprising. That's why Oklahoma needs to make sure they make him feel at home, and then just make him even more secure in his decision if he were to pick Oklahoma before his season starts. That way, he knows that their production's there.
And it's the type of player that I think Venables wants as far as from a culture fit. I mean, obviously he's an elite player, but there's a lot of elite players that don't fit this culture that they're looking for. And I think Nwaneri has the talent and the mindset that fits really well. So we'll see. Definitely something to be watching. I mean, maybe Colorado's going to be more of a threat than I think. I know he's been active on social media with his I think he posted maybe like a week ago he got a Colorado offer, and he's already got an official visit locked in with Colorado. So Deion Sanders is turning some heads. I mean, considering for someone that went for a program that went 1-11, and to get a 5-star to lock in a visit so fast and sign a 5-star in this past cycle, and it's maybe it's more of a threat than I think. So
we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. So anyway, we'll move on talking about staying in the 24, but switching the other side of the ball. 2024 4-star quarterback Michael Hawkins, 6'3", 195-pound kid out of McKinney, Texas, plays at Frisco Emerson. He is an OU legacy. His dad played at OU back in the day, and he's got a younger brother named Malik Hawkins, who's in the 2025 class. Now, obviously, I would imagine most people that are watching this video have heard of Michael Hawkins and are familiar, but if anyone isn't, he's obviously a legacy. He was scheduled to announce his commitment, I believe, on January 30th or 31st. I can't remember. Somewhere in there, he was supposed to announce his commitment a little over a week ago. That came and went, and no announcement came for his commitment either to OU, Arkansas, or TCU. There are a lot of rumors going around about Jeff Lebby in Alabama, and those have all been squashed at this point. And then you also had Kendall Briles leaving Arkansas to go to play at TCU and put TCU right in the mix. Since Tommy Rees has taken the OC job at Alabama, what Jeff Lebby was saying is real, and that he wasn't going to leave, and he didn't. And now you've got TCU seems to be putting themselves into contention They hosted Michael Hawkins for a visit. Obviously, that Kendall Briles connection probably immediately threw them towards the top. The question becomes now, when does Michael Hawkins maybe announce that he's going to commit? When does he do a commitment announcement? When he's going to commit? I mean, I would imagine he's going to come up to OU in March for a visit with the big recruiting weekends. That weekend, I think they've got 2. I would imagine he'll come to one, and I don't think his announcement will be too far away, whether it's Oklahoma or TCU. Arkansas seems to be completely out of this at this point. What do you think?
Yeah, we talked about it, I think 2 weeks ago. At this point, it feels like forever ago that he was supposed to make an announcement. And like you said, it's only been a week since that was supposed to be, when he was supposed to publicly announce the school that he was committing to. Clearly, like we mentioned last time, the Lebby rumors clearly made an impact on it. And then Kendall Briles moving to TCU, closer to home. It's going to be a race to it. I think it's really going to be beginning of March. And I said it last time, if he ends up going to the Oklahoma event March 4th, OU's got to feel comfortable, be in a good position to get his commitment on that weekend. If he ends up going to TCU, then they're going to have to turn their focus to Michael Van Buren or a different signal caller, see if they can get back in DJ Lagway. Florida's kind of in a situation where maybe they're not going to be very trusted, especially with the NIL stuff that just went down with Jaden Rashada. Maybe that opens up a door to try to get back with DJ Lagway. I mean, you never know. These recruitments aren't done until the piece of paper signed, and Oklahoma doesn't give up easily. So I would say March for Hawkins, and if it doesn't go Oklahoma's way, then they're going to have to focus and get someone on board, hopefully before the summer comes.
Yeah, and you and I, maybe not you, but I know I felt like that there was a chance that he was still going to commit at the end of January, assuming that Lebby, is saying, "Hey, I'm not going, and he trusts him, and then he just goes through with the announcement. Obviously, that didn't come to fruition, but it makes you wonder now, since he didn't make the announcement, it's given TCU some more time. It's going to give TCU the ability to really make this recruitment interesting. I still, at the end of the day, with OU being where his dad played, being a legacy school, Jeff Lebby, I still think OU wins out in this. But the longer this drags out, it can kind of hinder the 24 class a little bit because, still we're in February and there hasn't been a commitment yet. And I'm not saying if it's, he's the first commitment in March and then it's, the floodgates don't open, because they very well might. Just the longer this goes, the tougher it becomes to really to build a top 5 class. I still think they can. It's not too late. It's just the longer this drags out, it becomes more and more concerning if this goes much past beginning of March.
Yeah, I would hope that March is really when you see maybe a handful of guys start committing to Oklahoma. Because after March, you probably won't see very many visits or commitments before beginning of the summer, because that's really when kids start having more time. Parents have more time to go on visits. There's more events that schools will have. So if March comes and goes and Oklahoma still has 0, I would say that's slightly concerning, regardless of how some people may feel about it. And I get the staff wants these guys to be 100% convinced that Oklahoma is a place to be for them, but you gotta get some on board early on, because the peer-to-peer recruiting is vital when it comes to building a top 5 class. We saw it with this last go round, where Oklahoma was able to secure Peyton Bowen because of Jackson Arnold and the connection that Lebby and all the coaches were able to put together there. And you saw with other schools. Arch Manning was actively recruiting a lot for Texas. No matter how you feel about his skill, it's well known that he was actively texting and communicating with the guys that are part of his class. Alabama constantly has kids very outwardly saying we're going after this guy. And it's an important part of recruiting, just as much as NIL and building relationships with coaches, making sure these kids feel comfortable with the guys who are going into the program, is probably, I would say, a top three thing that these guys look at when it comes to making a decision on where they're going.
True. So, and you need the leader of the class. Like when Jackson Arnold committed to the 23 class, obviously Bates was already there, but once Jackson Arnold hopped on, you really saw a rush and a rush of commitments coming quickly after. And I'm thinking if they get Mike Hawkins on board, you could see a similar scenario. So, moving on to another guy, but I guess before we do that, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, Spotify. Everything's linked in the description below. Twitter's been growing, Instagram's been growing. If you want live up to the minute updates, follow us on there. And remember, when you're already subscribed and you want to continue to help out, like the video and comment. Jose will have an end of video challenge. It helps us out a lot so we can continue to keep growing. So we appreciate that. So next guy is a former teammate of Mike Hawkins, is Devon Mitchell, 6'4", 230-pound tight end, originally from Allen, Texas, and has now announced his transfer to Los Alamitos High School in Los Alamitos, California. He's a 2025 five-star tight end, number one tight end in the class, an elite talent that visited Oklahoma at the end of the month of January. And he made the announcement earlier this week that he is transferring to Los Alamitos. To me, it kind of came out of the blue, and obviously this is another target that Oklahoma had, like T.A. Cunningham, that ended up transferring out to Los Alamitos, and you got another one transferring out to California. It's not the most ideal scenario considering how close Allen High School is right down the road from Norman. But his edit did have an OU, him in an OU uniform. I don't know how much stock he can put into that, but what do you think about this transfer? It seems odd, but I mean, he's an elite talent.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to get more information on it as well. We reached out to Devon to try to figure out, kind of learn more about the situation in his transfer. We have to remember he is in high school. It could simply be as his parents, his dad, his mom got a job that had to move them to California, and Los Alamitos is a good school especially for football. I don't think really Oklahoma's got anything to worry about if they were going to be in his recruitment all the way up until the end at Allen. They're still going to do it now that he's in California and at Los Alamitos. Does USC become maybe a bigger contender now because they are right down the road? Definitely. It'd be crazy to think they're not, but it kind of goes back to Michael Hawkins, right? If you can secure his commitment, you put yourself that much more of a better spot. And something in his edit, he reclassified to 2024. So that puts the importance of a Michael Hawkins that much more to try to get this five-star tight end. Hopefully we can get a little bit more information from him and maybe get him on the show, but I really do think it's not as complicated as some people may want it to be. And something else that came into my mind when he committed or when he transferred over, if it is because of football, you can't blame his parents for wanting to move him over there. I get Texas football is big, but so is California football. And pro football players either train in LA or Florida because they have some of the best trainers in the sport, some of the best recovery, like doctors. I'm sure if it is just about football, then it's tough to not want to go to California or Florida to try to get your kid to improve and understand what it takes to be an elite football player at both the college and the NFL level.
Yeah, and I totally forgot in the edit. It did say 2024, which you bring up a good point. Mike Hawkins is peer-to-peer recruiter, really close best friend, one of his best friends anyway, I'd imagine. They're very tight. Just because he moves across the country doesn't mean that they won't keep up with each other, text, social media, whatever. So obviously Hawkins would be on him like no other. And maybe there's something with whenever you transfer to California, it's easier to reclassify. Maybe it's tougher in the state of Texas. I don't know the ins and outs of that. And maybe that was an objective to get him into college football faster. And maybe that's an avenue. I don't know. It's just, that could be. I don't know how hard it is in the state of Texas to do it. And each state's program or state's athletic association might have different standards and rules when it comes to that. But at the end of the day, I mean, he's an elite talent. He's had I think he had like 700 yards last year at Allen, as a sophomore, but now he, could be reclassifying and this could be his last year. I do think USC is a factor here, but honestly, he just seems like a guy that USC is going to be good, but I think he's got other aspirations to go be playing in the SEC and go play with, back towards where he came, where he's originally from. So, but that's tough to say because, we felt really good about T.A. Cunningham, but that was a year ago and he's in California now and it kind of feels like it's fading a little bit. Does Oklahoma continue to recruit Devon as hard? I would hope so.
Well, T.A. Cunningham's situation was different, and he was from Georgia, so
yeah,
I think it was going to be hard regardless for Oklahoma to try to get him. But for a tight end, I don't think there's really any other school to be intimidated to get a commitment out of an elite tight end other than Georgia. Can't really think of another program that has really highlighted that position better than them. From the pass catching perspective. I know Iowa produces really good tight ends in the pro level, but no one has ever really looked like a Brock Bowers or a Darnell Washington. I know Eric Gilbert was supposed to be a guy that was elite for him, but their tight end room, if you just look at the recruiting rankings, is elite. And Brock Bowers was the best football player on the field during a national championship. You would assume that most tight ends are going to look at that and say, I think I can do what Brock did or better going to Georgia. So, I mean, and look at Lincoln Riley's offense, right? Objectively, the tight end never looked amazing. Mark Andrews, I think, was the best tight end, and that was years ago at this point. You haven't seen a tight end produce like Mark Andrews has in Lincoln Riley's offense ever.
Yeah, I mean, he is far removed from the production of Mark Andrews. I mean, Mark Andrews was elite. Yeah, I think Joe John Finley. It seems like obviously Devon Mitchell is interested. He's been on OU's campus quite a few times. And hopefully that connection continues to pay dividends, and hopefully we see him on campus in March. The only thing is, I don't know what financially, everything, the situation is, but it just makes trips out to Oklahoma unofficially more expensive now, unfortunately. So, I mean, it's a lot easier to just get in your car and drive 3 hours north, 2.5, 3 hours north, rather than getting on an airplane, flying to Oklahoma City, getting an Uber or renting a car. I mean, it just becomes very expensive. But that might not be an issue. That might not be an object. So hopefully that's the case, and then continue to get them on campus. So do you have any more thoughts about football before we move on to a little bit about basketball?
No, I think for the most part, it'll be okay. Like I said, biggest thing is just getting a handful of guys before the end of March.
Yeah. So an interesting topic, talking about Porter Moser again. Obviously, Oklahoma's struggling a little bit, but they've got everything in front of them. If they win a handful of their games and they win a Big 12 championship, or not a Big 12 championship, but the Big 12 tournament, they might win a game there. They could weasel their way into the March Madness and maybe make the tournament. But obviously, Porter Moser, there's been some talks and things like that. I still think he's Oklahoma's guy for at least another year, maybe even two. To change a culture, as we've talked about. It's hard to change a culture in just 2 years when you have massive turnover. But there is an opening that's going to be happening in the basketball world. Mike Bray is stepping away from Notre Dame. He's announced his retirement earlier. I think it was in January. He announced his retirement upcoming at the end of the season. And could Porter Moser be interested in taking that job? With the way that Oklahoma football is down here, I mean, it is the king. Basketball takes a back seat to it. Notre Dame, will attract elite coaching, and I think Porter Moser is still an elite coach. while Notre Dame football is bigger, but Notre Dame basketball feels bigger than Oklahoma basketball, from a brand and a perception of recent memory anyway. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some OU fans are going to tell me I'm wrong, but I feel like Notre Dame basketball is more well known than Oklahoma basketball. Could Porter Moser be interested in that job? And with the heat he's been taking, might he be interested?
I think so. I mean, he would go back to the area where he had his success, going back, to that part of the country, maybe a little bit more comfortable culturally. I don't think he has. Not that he hasn't been a cultural fit at Oklahoma. He's from the moment he got to campus, his biggest focus is trying to make Oklahoma basketball as close to as big as football is for Oklahoma fans. I remember when he stepped on campus, like he was doing all these like events where he would go to fraternities and sororities and other student organizations to kind of hype up the presence of students at basketball games, because that's big. I mean, it's not like Lloyd Noble is a huge arena, so the more students, the better. I think the LNC has definitely had good turnouts at times, and there's definitely been times where you don't even know if they have fans. And I think that also just lends to basketball. It's during the week, so it's harder for people to get to go to Norman. But he, I think, is definitely going to be on the short list for guys that Notre Dame would want to interview and try to get to be the coach for their program. I just don't know how much interest he would want in leaving so soon. Especially when it's not like he's been super successful at Oklahoma. If he was able to, if like from year 1 to 2, if this year he was on a track to for sure be in the tournament, be competitive in the Big 12, then maybe you could see if he's kind of a guy that wants to step up to a challenge and build a program in his image. Maybe you could see that happening, but it's tough to assume that someone would leave after 2 seasons, especially when they've been so unsuccessful. It would make more sense if Oklahoma let him go and then he was Notre Dame's guy, but I also don't see that happening after 2 seasons because of the turnover that we talked about last time. Next year, maybe, if Bray had waited 1 more year to announce his plans to retire, and then I think Porter Moser would definitely be number 1 guy to take that Notre Dame job.
Yeah, I don't see Porter leaving. I like the point that you made. I mean, Oklahoma's still a really good job. It's a big program. You haven't been overly successful in 2 years. I do think that some things are out of his control as well. I mean, obviously we've talked about the transfers out of the program from last year, a few of them with Moser Gibson and Harkless that we weren't expecting. And that's tough to replace. And I also think it's just the reality of college basketball. I mean, you only play 5 players at a time on the court at any given time. And one of those main players leaves, it's tough. And a lot of kids are hitting the portal. They're moving around. You can be an immediate contributor more so than you could be in football. It's a weird dynamic. And it's also a little bit of a transition period. I feel like sometimes some kids might be going to the portal too much or too soon. Like football, I think there's some growing pains with the portal. There's been great things. I mean, Sherfield's been great. Don't get me wrong. But Moser's also found some pretty good young players, freshmen and sophomores. So I think he has that going for him. I don't see him jumping ship, but it was just an interesting thought being in that area.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'd be crazy to see him leave. I just don't expect him to be the one to voluntarily get out of Oklahoma. Oklahoma would have to be the one, maybe give him a heads up, like, hey, you're going to get canned. Maybe to actually look at this job and the possibility of moving on, but that also doesn't seem likely. And with basketball, you mentioned it, like it's harder to maintain unless you're a big brand like a blue blood in basketball. You're going to have turnover pretty regularly. You just have to be able to keep a core group of maybe 4 or 5 guys. Then you have to be your 5 starters, just guys that are leaders in your locker room that can help build your program, and you'll be good. Especially with NIL, like Oklahoma. Let's be realistic. NIL wise, not going to compete with a Duke or UNC, no matter how big the school is, because you can look at the Crimson and Cream numbers whenever they're doing that 30-day challenge. Like, you could donate to a specific sport or do all sports, and for the most part, people are donating to football. And I think basketball was either second or third. And if they were third, they were like right behind softball, which makes sense because softball is the most successful sport at Oklahoma right now.
Yeah, winning creates revenue, and Oklahoma basketball hasn't done a lot of that ever since, obviously the Final Four run. But they had a great run last year, and you know what? They very well could go on a run here, and I might be optimistic in the sunshine pumper here, but there is an opportunity to make a run in the March Madness. I mean, we're playing in the toughest conference in all of the country in the Big 12 for basketball, so there's that. But that's all I've got. Do you have any final thoughts or an video challenge?
In the video challenge, let's see. What's your favorite soda? I've been getting back. I don't know why. I've just been drinking soda a lot more. It used to just be beer or water, but I tried this Dr. Pepper strawberries and cream. This stuff's delicious. You guys should give it a try.
Interesting. Mine is just Coca-Cola. I mean, just the original, plain old simple.
Fair.
But
I feel like you're either a Coke or a Pepsi person. I haven't met too many Pepsi people, but the logo's dope.
Yeah. So anyway, you made it this far. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, and Spotify, and TikTok. Everything's linked in the description below, and we will catch you guys on Friday.